My friends, the events that unfolded in the so-called Asian Arc have irreversibly changed the dynamics of power. And the signals sent in recent weeks show that Beijing's room for maneuver has shrunk drastically. And the tremor can be felt here in Brazil. Look, what happened on the beaches and bases of the Philippines was no longer just a routine training exercise or a formal demonstration of military cooperation. We are witnessing the final nail in the coffin on the Chinese Navy's ambitions in the Western Pacific. 2 live-fire tests of heavy weapon systems were carried out on Philippine soil and changed the strategic calculus in the region. On one side, American forces operating the Typhoon mobile launcher, a platform capable of firing long-range Tomahawk cruise missiles, known for their ability to hit naval targets over 1,500 kilometers away. On the other side, Japanese crews deployed the Type 88 system, an anti-ship missile battery specifically designed to block the passage of fleets in narrow waters. My friends, this is China's desperation. The Chinese state media reacted immediately and hysterically. But the harsh truth is that behind-the-scenes analysts, armchair analysts, and keyboard warriors all recognize that there is almost nothing the Central Command in Beijing can do to reverse this new reality on the ground. Now, keep a fundamental question in your mind as you analyze the technical facts I'm going to show you now. If you're an elite analyst, by the end of this video, you'll have to decide whether what Beijing is facing is a relentless encirclement strategy or a scenario of pure Western desperation. But now subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and like the video because it takes a lot of work to make it. To truly understand the impact of this shot, you need to look at the region's geography and understand the fundamental concept of the first island chain. We're talking about a continuous natural barrier that stretches from Japan, passes through Taiwan, look at the map, goes down through the Philippine archipelago, and reaches Malaysia and Indonesia. This is the route that's suffocating China. They're terrified of this. In intelligence terms, this line isn't simply a list of Washington's allies. It works as a real geopolitical lock. Got it? This island belt completely blocks China's navy from accessing the open ocean and the rest of the world. Unless these nations allow passage, of course, but can you imagine? You're the biggest tough guy in the region, but to leave, to go to the bathroom, you have to ask for permission? Now come with me. Throughout the entire Cold War and the post-Cold War era, this lock remained deliberately open. Yes, we're at peace, aren't we? You may pass. Well, the United States chose not to fortify these islands because during that historical period, China was seen as a useful strategic asset to counterbalance the weight of the Soviet Union. Nobody's nice for nothing. The West turned a blind eye to Beijing's economic and military growth in exchange for trade stability. In fact, it was the United States that accelerated China's growth. If they had known they were creating a dragon that could swallow them, my friends, no one warned them that time was up. In recent decades, the behavior of the Chinese regime has become more aggressive, turning what was once a trading partner into a hostile force determined to push Western fleets out of its sphere of influence. The direct consequence of this change is that the geopolitical lock has just been destroyed, locked with the key. We have just entered the early stages of a massive fortification of the island chain, carried out not only by Washington under Trump's command, but also autonomously by the countries of the archipelago themselves who realized the imminent danger of the dragon. And the great revolution of this strategic move is not in the raw firepower of the missiles, but in the logistics of how they're deployed. Both the American Typhoon launcher, as well as the Japanese Type 88 systems, share the same operational characteristic. Pay attention, they are fully mobile platforms mounted on heavy truck chassis. And what behind-the-scenes analysts need to understand is that you no longer need to spend billions of dollars to build, operate, and protect giant aircraft carriers that serve as fixed targets for hypersonic missiles. In modern access denial warfare, all you need is a sergeant in charge of an ordinary military truck hidden on a back road in the interior of a remote island in the Philippines in those endless forests. The Type 88 system has a range of about 120 kilometers, but the American Typhoon extends that line of destruction far beyond the visual horizon. The system programs itself in milliseconds, and what happens in practice is that the command in Beijing thinks they have control of the seas, but all they really have is a moving target that's impossible to track. The American system isn't just winning the fight, it's humiliating the aggressor's strategic planning. The Philippines historically have had one of the lowest and most erratic military capabilities in the entire region. But the moment you deploy tactical trucks operated by American Marines and Japanese specialists throughout the territory, anything that floats gets sunk. 1,000 kilometers from the archipelago, it becomes a total exclusion zone.
Exclusão total para os navios chineses.
The spell backfires on the sorcerer. If the truck changes position every 2 hours between the tropical forests and the mountains, it's hard for them to be disarmed. However, to transform the American system is to make him establish a new one.
Ataque estável, a frota chinesa foi efetivamente castrada em sua capacidade de progressão.
He wants the American system to be like the Beijing government's security system. What he wants is security, and prepared in the chain like the island of Taiwan. But if you think this barrier is limited to the Philippines, you're mistaken. The signal that Japan's logistical and military apparatus has triggered is what should really keep you up at night. Not mine, not yours, but China's. Because what I'm about to reveal to you now connects the Philippine archipelago directly with the waters of Taiwan and the awakening of a force that has been dormant since 1945. My friends, this is the first time since the end of World War II that Japan has conducted a test of a purely offensive weapon system outside its own home islands. After their defeat in the last century, Tokyo was forced by the terms imposed by the United States to adopt a constitution of permanent peaceful neutrality, limiting its armed forces to strict domestic self-defense tasks. This legal barrier is rapidly disintegrating before the eyes of the world. Has everything changed now? Japan has by far the second most modern, capable, and advanced blue water navy on the entire planet. The moment the Japanese government decides to break institutional isolation and begins to deploy and test its heavy artillery assets and anti-ship missiles on the territory of partner nations across the Pacific, does that change the picture? It no longer matters what the future of internal political relations in Washington will be or the degree of isolation of future American administrations. Japan has taken on the direct responsibility of patrolling and sealing off the exit routes from the South China Sea, ensuring that Beijing's fleet remains confined to a closed lagoon on the western side of the island chain. All this architecture of missiles and mobile launchers has a direct and brutal connection to the real economy, striking at the very foundation of the daily survival of ordinary citizens within Chinese territory. To understand the seriousness of this suffocation, we need to look at the extreme structural vulnerability of a country that depends entirely on the uninterrupted flow of global maritime routes. Let me explain something very directly that will completely change your understanding of the real danger that China can pose to the world. Look at this. China is not, by any technical criteria, a self-sufficient country. Not in energy, not in food, not in industry. The operation of its industries and even feeding its population depend on the massive import of energy from the Middle East, as well as fertilizers, phosphate, and essential chemical inputs coming from other continents. From Brazil, they take soybeans, iron ore, meat, and other commodities that simply, without importation, it would be impossible to feed these people. 1 billion mouths, don't forget that. Without these imported inputs, Chinese soil completely loses the productive capacity to produce the food needed to sustain all its people. Beijing's economic model requires the continuous inflow of raw materials to turn them into manufactured goods that need to be shipped out by sea to pay the state's bills. In other words, raw materials need ships. The finished and manufactured product also needs ships. And ships are only useful if the sea is open. If you disrupt the shipping lanes, the whole system collapses in a matter of months. And that's why control of the first island chain represents control over the lifeline of the Chinese economy. My friends, the invincible communist dragon of China, Lula's friend, is more fragile than a crystal glass. The United States and Japan have the classic naval power to shut off that valve whenever they want. Nations like Singapore and Malaysia control the Strait of Malacca, also under American and Indian influence, a natural rival of China. the choke point through which almost all the oil destined for Beijing passes. Australia extends its surveillance systems to secure the southern corridor. And now, with these coordinated tests, the Philippines deploys sergeants in regular trucks equipped with highly lethal cruise missiles along its winding roads. Whoever controls this archipelago has a firm grip on the neighboring regime's lifeline. A government that cannot guarantee internal subsistence without the permission of the neighbors surrounding its sea does not have the material conditions to sustain a prolonged war of attrition. In other words, true and absolute sovereignty does not exist. It only exists in times of peace, and that's why China treads carefully when dealing with the United States and Western allies. Now, we've seen the tactical design of the geopolitical lock across the Pacific. We've seen the historic break of Japanese neutrality for the first time in over 80 years. We've seen the structural collapse of supply security in Asia. Now look closely at the moving pieces on the map. On one hand, the coordinated deployment of mobile missile batteries that nullify the usefulness of Beijing's fleet resembles a relentless long-term containment strategy. On the other hand, the furious and automatic rejection by the Chinese state media in response to a few trucks on Philippine soil exposes the extent of their desperation upon realizing that their structural vulnerability has been mapped out once and for all. It's time for you to give your technical verdict, remember? But now I want to separate the strong from the weak. I want your tactical position here in the comments of this video right now. Get ready. If you understood that the barrier set up along the chain of islands nullified Beijing's projection and left the regime with no real way out, write the word strategy in the comments. But if you think that the hysterical reaction of the Chinese system proves that they realize their food and energy survival is under someone else's control, write the word desperation. I will personally read each of these comments to find out who here is an elite analyst and who is still stuck in armchair analysis. Share your technical assessment because the time for doubt is over. China is boxed in. And what we saw in the Philippines was the last nail being hammered in. While the media focuses on rhetoric, the trucks are already in position. The signal has been given, my friends. The stage is set and the forces are already moving behind the scenes. And for those of you who want to understand the real game before the system collapses for good, the way is not through open social networks. That's why we built our private intelligence hub. An exclusive platform, a fully protected environment where censorship simply can't stop us. Inside, there are more than 3,000 elite analysts who dissect every geopolitical and economic move in real time, delivering the raw information that no one else has the courage to show and funding the truth that we bring here on the YouTube platform. My friends, you can access it on screen now via the QR code. The link is in the video description and in the first pinned comment. Go there and secure your spot before the doors close. And if you want to protect your home and your family from social engineering that is destroying our culture, check out our series and movies channel. A curated selection made for you to watch with your loved ones. No woke culture, no whining, straight to the point. This is for those of you who spend an hour on Netflix, an hour on Amazon just to pick something good because everything has turned into garbage. Well, we've solved your problem. So, the link is in the description, in the pinned comment, and also in the card that will appear here on your screen. Now comes the best part of this video. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and leave a like on the video. Now shield your mind. I'm Shimon Oliveira, and I'll see you next time. See you then.